Hi guys and welcome to HCP Storytime. Today we are going to be taking a trip into the past, 30 years into the past, to 1993. I was a young kid back then and I just watched the X-Men cartoon on television for the first time. Like most people back then, my favorite character was Wolverine, and this was thanks in no small part to the amazing voice work of the character's voice actor, Cal Dodd. He is easily one of the most iconic voice actors for a cartoon character, on the same level to me as someone like Mark Hamill, who played the Joker in the Batman animated series. Back then, my mom came home one fateful evening from shopping in the big city. In her hands, she had two comic books, Wolverine number 76 and Ghost Rider number 43. I was 8 years old and this was the first time I had ever seen comic books. I didn't even know they existed. I have no idea to this day what inspired my mom to pick up those comic books for me, but they pretty soon became two of my most treasured possessions. Now, unfortunately, my versions have not survived the last 30 years. While Ghost Rider just has some superficial damage to the cover, Wolverine number 76 has been poached of its coolest panels, thanks to me and a pair of scissors. While Ghost Rider was mind-blowing to me, I didn't so much care for the Wolverine comic. Even though I loved the cartoon version of Wolverine, my young mind was not ready to see Wolverine in his more mature comic book setting. Today we will delve into why this comic book shocked and scandalized me as a young kid. We will re-evaluate this comic with our adult sensibilities and maybe gain some new insights and revelations about this great book. Today, almost everyone knows Wolverine, a Mr. Logan James Hewlett, an adamantium-clawed mutant who has been alive for decades thanks to his superhuman healing abilities. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine on the big screen has been delighting audiences since the 2000s, but 30 years ago Wolverine was pretty much just known to comic book fans. At that time, neither the fans nor the minds behind the character at Marvel Studios knew much about his backstory, simply because it hadn't been made up yet. All we knew for sure was that the character we knew in 1993 was created in the Weapon X project, which was a government-funded program to create superhumans. Even Wolverine's full name was a mystery back then. I mean, in the comic we're looking at today, it's revealed that his passport literally says Logan W. Logan. Now, I may sound like a crazy old man here, but it's amazing to think back to a time before the internet, before Google, where you didn't have access to all information instantly. Back then, if you wanted to know something about a character's superpowers or a bit about their backstory or current storyline, you just would know it. You just never find that out. Unless, of course, you bought the weekly comics for 10,000 different characters. If you wanted to find out information on any subject, you'd had to leave your house, travel miles and miles to get to a library, where hopefully there'll be some dusty tome of knowledge hidden somewhere that can fill in your ignorance. It was a crazy time, ladies and gentlemen. Crazy! I mean, if you had a school project, you had no choice but to leave your house, go to the library and go through racks and racks of information. Like you're some kind of ancient Roman unfurling scrolls in the temple of knowledge. If you didn't follow the comic regularly, you'd have no idea what's going on if you just pick up some random comic book. And that is what's so important here today. My lack of any contextual knowledge about what's going on in this comic book. But what had happened to Wolverine prior to the release of this comic book was essential in appreciating this book's nuances, as it was one of the most defining moments in the character's life. In the X-Men comic book timeline, at this point, they had just concluded the Fatal Attractions storyline, where Magneto and the X-Men had a massive showdown on an asteroid. It ended with Magneto ripping the adamantium metal off of Wolverine's bones, nearly killing him in the process. Wolverine's superhuman healing abilities spared him the worst of the trauma, but now it was barely functioning, and as things stood, Wolverine was currently pretty much human. Later on in the comic series, Wolverine's healing abilities would get more and more exaggerated, but back in the early 90s, it had mostly been shown that he could instantly heal cuts and bruises, and in a few days he could heal broken bones. This adamantium extraction through his skin was by far the most extreme thing we have seen him have to deal with up to this point. Logan survived the attack, but now, with no healing factor, no indestructible metal coating his bones, he was pretty much human. A human in a team of superhuman people. On top of that, he would probably rapidly age into a useless old man now, since his healing factor exponentially decreased his aging process. So with it being gone, what's going to happen now? At this point in the comic book timeline, Wolverine had lost his entire reason for being, his entire purpose. He was living on borrowed time, and not to mention he was busy dealing with the physical and mental trauma of what Magneto had just done to him. Now, I knew none of this, ladies and gentlemen. I was 8 years old at the time, and I'd just been watching cartoons and having a good time with my X-Men pals, watching them get into shenanigans and have their colorful little adventures. And now I am here dealing with this man who overnight had not just become obsolete, but truly vulnerable for the first time in his life. The first Wolverine comic had come out in 1982. Frank Miller was the artist behind it, and he would go on to do iconic work for Batman and the Sin City comic book series. So Logan, aka Wolverine, had been doing what he does best for at least 10 years in 1993, and even longer in comic book time. So what lay ahead for our hero now that he has lost his powers? Is he going to retire to a ranch somewhere, smoke some stogies, reminisce about the good old days when he served a purpose? And all that is the subtext that we head into Wolverine number 76 with. I knew none of this. I knew none of this, ladies and gentlemen. How can you hold me accountable for my negative opinion on the comic book at the time? So the comic finds Wolverine having healed from the worst of his injuries under the care of the X-Men. He's heading back to Canada on his Harley to one Heather Hudson. She's the woman who found him feral in the woods years ago after he had escaped the Weapon X project. She took him in and nursed him back to health and sanity. So it's just natural, right? Once you've been shook to the core like Wolverine just has, you kind of want to go back to mommy, right? You want that home-cooked meal, you want mommy going, shh, 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 everything's going to be okay, right? Maybe not like this, but like gently, like a little stroke of the, So who better than the lady who nursed him back to health? The comic starts with Wolverine, a tired old man, daydreaming as he blasts his Harley on the way down to Canada. The night smells different up in Canada. It's the north wind blowing down all that Arctic air that was charged by the aurora borealis, air that gusted across the fields of ice that ain't never felt the tread of human feet. It sets me thinking and dreaming, which are two things the old canicle head shouldn't be doing when he's pushing his scoot on an all-night run to Ottawa. It slows down my reaction time something fierce. Same thing happened to that old fox. Too intent on running down that rabbit. He just wasn't paying attention, and it ruined his day. Didn't do much good for mine either. And with that, Wolverine kills a rabbit with his Harley. I was 8, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot express what went through my mind as I saw Wolverine killing a tiny little rabbit. Pretty much the same thing that went through my mind the first time I saw UFC. What is the world coming to, ladies and gentlemen? Where have all the cowboys gone, ladies and gentlemen? This ain't nothing, really. Dropping a bike, scraping off a square root to hide. Nothing a cold 6 won't cure. Now that old fox is another story. He's banged up pretty bad, or he would have dragged his prey off with him. Gotta do something for him. Even the old sniffer ain't what it used to be. I gotta track my eye and my vision's getting foggy. That fox is hurting, and it wants to go home. Yeah, ain't we all? Now, I'd never encountered writing like this ever before, and it really shaped my thinking and my own writing throughout the rest of my life. The writer is a guy called Larry Hama, and just as Cal Dodd was born to voice act Wolverine in the cartoons, and just how Hugh Jackman is perfect to play Wolverine on the big screen, for me, Larry Hama is the perfect writer for the character. And whenever I read this, just like when you think of Morgan Freeman when you read something he says, whenever I read this comic, I think in Cal Dodd's voice. Not only was the writing really shocking to my 8-year-old sensibilities, but the artwork was quite controversial in my opinion at the time as well. For me, the defining comic artist for Wolverine is Adam Kubert, who did amazing work throughout the series. With Wolverine number 76, however, I think Adam took a holiday because there had 2 guest artists working, Tom Coker and Al Milgrom. The art style really put me off as a kid, which is why my comic book is in shreds today. This comic would usually be worth about $5 to $10, but now it's worth only the dreams and memories of a child, ladies and gentlemen. However, looking at the comic book with adult eyes, I can really appreciate the art style much more. It's pretty amazing. There really isn't anything else like it, and it perfectly encapsulates the unnatural and unnerving mood and mindset of where Wolverine is now mentally and physically. There are so many iconic panels in this comic, including seeing Wolverine's bone claws ripped through his skin for the first time, which was shocking. Up until this point, comic book fans had only seen Wolverine's shiny, neat adamantium claws. We didn't even know Wolverine had bone claws, as it was implied that the Weapon X project is what gave him claws in the first place. But with all that said, nothing was as shocking to me as seeing Wolverine cry. I mean, come on, my hero was killing rabbits and crying. My world was shattered, ladies and gentlemen. Talk about a loss of innocence. After crashing his Harley and being attacked by wolves, a group of bikers find Logan and take him to an address he has written down on a piece of paper with him. The address is for Heather Hudson. And as the bikers point out, they are helping the stranger because he looks like a bro. With Wolverine comatose, we see a dream sequence that starts with this really cool panel. Ever since seeing this, I've always wanted to see a detective series featuring Logan solving crimes and kicking butt. Again, having only seen the cartoon and being 8, it was really shocking seeing Wolverine smoking, drinking, and of course getting shot in the street. He goes into an excellent monologue here. Hey, how about we skip the next few nightmares? Everything just goes downhill from here. All that time in the tank at the Weapon X project. Living a floating dream about a plane of spikes, a world of pain. A place where redemption and mercy are lost in a sea of terror. A hole in the bottom of hope where you scream the name of the one you love, and your own voice bounces back at you like it was echoing through the eye sockets of a giant skull. I'm holding them bones close to me, and they crumble. Enter Magneto, the man that traumatized our hero, heavily stylized in his look here by the artists. This design really left an impression on me. He looks amazing and delivers one of the most iconic lines I've ever read in my life. Gone, gone to the dust of ages. And that's exactly how I read it as a kid, and I still hear it like that in my head. Gone, gone to the dust of ages. Magneto berates him. Gone, gone to the dust of ages. Brittle calcium, such is the mortal framework, but you, my friend, are possessed of a more enduring infrastructure, adamantium, and thus I wrench the inner core from you, that which makes you what you are. To which Wolverine replies, no, I am more than that. Wolverine finally wakes up, comforted by Heather. Without knowing any of these two characters' backstory or history, the panels do an amazing job showing the relationship between the two. It's unspoken, but the body language is clear as day. With his healing factor not working, Logan is shocked to find that he has been passed out for 2 days, and yet he still wakes up tired. Wolverine is a guy that could once walk off broken ribs. Now it's almost as if he's human. Or he's turning 30, am I right? His newfound humanity is really impressed on the reader, with Wolverine cutting himself shaving and dropping the line, I gotta TP my mug like everybody else. Now we also get introduced to a side story thread here. Lady Mariko, the former love of Wolverine's life, is looking for him to kill him for some reason. She had genetically or mechanically altered herself to become the villain Lady Deathstrike. And again, I didn't know the who, the what, or the why of what was happening here, because how would I? Where else would I get that information other than within the pages of the comic books? Ladies and gentlemen, it was a difficult time back then. All we know from the comic is she finds out Wolverine is in Canada and then goes to kill him for some reason. We get a few more great panels that show the close relationship between Logan and Heather. Heather helps Logan hack into the Canadian government databases to find out about the Weapon X project, as at this point both Logan and the reader didn't know much about the program that turned him into Wolverine. It should also be noted here that this was the first time I read the word limo and pronounced it limo. It made no sense to me. I assumed it was the lady in the car or their wealth that made them lamos or limos. The comic ends on a cliffhanger with an injured, aging, sans superpower Wolverine being attacked by the monstrous love of his life, Lady Deathstrike. What happens next? I have no idea, ladies and gentlemen, because my mommy only got me the one comic. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed me sharing the experiences I had with the first comic I ever owned. We also reminisced a bit about a time pre-internet where you couldn't have instant access to all of human knowledge. And if you ever wanted any information on the X-Men or Wolverine, you only had your weekly cartoon to look forward to, and of course this, ladies and gentlemen, the sacred texts. As a kid I was pretty chuffed knowing that I'm the only person who knew that Magneto ripped out Wolverine's adamantium skeleton and nearly killed him in the process. Whenever we played an X-Men or Wolverine game or watched the show, I could always say to my friends, oh yeah, there was that one time that blah 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 blah. I mean, imagine that, ladies and gentlemen. Knowing one thing about something and thinking you're an expert on it, huh? The more things change, eh? Anyway, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. More coming soon. Have a good one.